Hello everyone. In this video we look at the calorimetry part of thermal properties of matter. Now the thermal properties of matter chapter, right? So we have it actually divided into three segments. One is the calorimetry part, second is thermal expansion, and third is the heat transfer. In some textbooks what you see is that heat transfer will be given as a separate chapter, but anyway we are going to deal with each of the segments and see three separate videos, so we will not have an issue in that sense. Now to talk about calorimetry, right, this is a precursor to thermodynamics. So thermodynamics is the study of heat changes. In chemistry thermodynamics you will talk about it more from the point of view of the study of heat changes in chemical reactions. In physics we will study more from the point of view of heat engines. So when we go to thermodynamics we will be able to understand what will be the similarities between thermodynamics in chemistry and thermo in physics. Also what are some of the differences. But calorimetry as such is the precursor. So it is also about the study of heat. Since we are going to study about heat, let us first begin with the discussion about the heat itself. So what is heat? Initially there were theories, multiple theories suggesting what could be the heat and so on and so forth. In fact, one of the popular theories was that heat is a kind of a fluid. Like, the common perception is what if you are holding a hot iron rod, you don't hold, very hot one, but mildly if it is hot, you just hold it, right? I mean, practically what is the sense you will get? You will get a sense as if something is flowing from the iron rod into your hand. Similarly, if you are holding a cold object, like an ice cube, try and hold ice cube in your hand. What is the perception you will get? You will get a perception as if something is going out of your hand into the ice cube. So the idea of heat as a fluid has been there in existence for some time, but later it is clearly understood that heat is also a form of energy which will flow from hot object to cold object. Now what is a hot object and what is a cold object? We will see once we talk about the temperature. But heat as such is a form of energy which will transfer from one body to other body. Since it is a form of energy, what will be the SI unit of this? The SI unit of this will be Joule. And what will be the dimensional formula? The dimensional formula will be ml square T power minus 2. And we have one more practical unit of heat, that is calorie. So we will see quickly what is the definition of calorie. So 1 calorie is basically the heat required to raise temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius from where 14.5 to 15.5 degrees. Whatever is the energy that is required, or the heat energy that is required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water from 14.5 to 15.5 means 1 degree Celsius. This is what is the definition of calorie. So you can see, like the way we have definitions of the SI units, right? All standard units, because calorie is also standard unit. All standard units, they'll have like this proper definitions. This is something that we have discussed even in the units and dimension chapter. So this is about the more common unit of heat, which is the calorie. So we also have a conversion factor which we will understand by using the mechanical equivalent of heat. So the conversion is if you look at 1 calorie, right? So 1 calorie will be equal to 4.186 joules. This is something that we will remember. But in the language of thermodynamics, right, we represent this conversion factor by using the mechanical equivalent of heat concept. What is the mechanical equivalent of heat concept? It is nothing but a different way of expressing the conversion of calorie into joule. That's it. Keep that in mind. 4.186 means we can say even approximately what? 4.2. So what is the mechanical equivalent of heat idea? If you look at the mechanical energy or work, which we will indicate with the symbol W, which is being converted into heat form. W amount of work is converted into Q heat. The relation between them is expressed as what? W is equal to J into Q. What is the relation? W is equal to what? J into Q. So here the J is what we will be referring as the mechanical equivalent of heat. This J is what we will call as mechanical equivalent of heat. So which means if we have, say for example, 4.2 joules, this will be equal to what? 1 calorie of heat. So 4.2 joules will be equal to 1 calorie of heat. So which means whatever is the number of calories, Q will be what number? Q will be in calories. We have to multiply this with how much? 4.2 to get the work in terms of joules, because work will be in terms of joules and heat will be in terms of calorie. That relation is what we are bringing by using what? The mechanical equivalent of heat. So as such, right, here if you look at the J, what is the J? It's just a conversion factor, nothing more. So what is this? 4.186 joule per calorie. What is the conversion factor? 4.186. We can even say what is it? Approximately 4.2 joule per calorie. Okay. So whenever you hear the word mechanical equivalent of heat, don't get into too much of thinking. It's just a conversion factor. Since it is the conversion factor, it will not have any dimensional formula. You can see it is what joule per calorie means. It will not have any dimensional formula, and also this is not a physical quantity. It is just a conversion factor. Okay, so this is about the idea of mechanical equivalent of heat, which is the conversion factor used for converting the heat in calories into joules. Okay, now the heat, as we said initially, is a form of energy which will flow from one object to other object, hot object to cold object. That's what we said. So how do we measure which is a hot object, which is a cold object? So we'll measure which is a hot object or which is a cold object by using the concept of temperature. So how do you define temperature? This is a very standard definition. We have been seeing it from lower standard itself. What is it? Temperature is the measure of degree of hotness or degree of coldness of the body. Now, how do we look at temperature in terms of the temperature scales, the common temperature scales that we talk about? We have the Celsius scale, we have the Kelvin scale, which is also called as the absolute scale. Then we have the Fahrenheit scale, and also a couple of other scales are there, but mostly we will limit our discussion to these three scales. Now the thing is that temperature can be expressed on any of the scales. We know that the Kelvin scale is the temperature values that we will be using in terms of the SI units. Why this is called as absolute scale is because we cannot achieve a temperature which is less than 0 Kelvin. Means that 0 is like absolute 0. We cannot go below that. The thing about the temperature scales is usually we will have temperature values given in any of the scales. We may have to convert the value of temperature from one scale to other scale. And the conversion rate, even probably from 9th standard itself, we have some conversion equations will be there. Like Celsius is equal to some 9/5, something like that. Here we will try to understand how those formulas actually come. Now for every temperature scale, right, we have these two reference points. One is the freezing point of water, second is the boiling point. On Fahrenheit scale, if you look at it, right, what is the freezing point? 32. Boiling point 212. Celsius scale 0. Boiling point 100. Kelvin scale, we can either say 273 or we can even talk about 273.15. Here 373.15. Now every scale between the freezing point and the boiling point of water will be divided into units. Here you can see what is the difference between them. 373 minus 273 is what? 100. Here what is it? 100 minus 0 is what? 100. Here 212 minus 32 is what? 180 units. Now the way we will do the conversion from one temperature scale to other temperature scale is, if you look at the temperature reading on Celsius scale 0, what will be the reading on the Fahrenheit scale 32? What will be the corresponding reading on the Kelvin scale 273? The moment we reach the boiling point of water, the reading on the Fahrenheit will be 212. Reading on the Celsius will be 100. Reading on the Kelvin is going to be 373.15. So which means the scale length, if you look at it, when the total scale length is covered on Fahrenheit scale, total scale length will be covered on Celsius scale, total scale length will be covered on the Kelvin scale. If you cover half the scale on the Fahrenheit, here also we will cover half, here also we will cover half. If you cover 1/4 of the scale, here we will cover 1/4, here we will cover 1/4. So which means on any temperature scale, the relative distance covered will remain the same. Which means what? We will see. From here only we will get the conversion relation. Let us say the temperature value on the Fahrenheit scale is some degree Fahrenheit. The temperature value in the Celsius scale is corresponding degree Celsius. Temperature value on the Kelvin scale is K. Remember, we will put the degree only for the Fahrenheit and Celsius. We will not put the degree for the Kelvin. So if you look at what is this relative distance covered means, the temperature on the Fahrenheit scale is some F. Starting point is what? 32. So degree Fahrenheit minus 32 divided by what is the total length of the scale? 180. This is what we will be referring as the relative distance covered on the Fahrenheit scale. The distance covered by total length. That will be equal to, here you see Celsius scale temperature degree Celsius minus starting point is 0. What is the total length of the scale? 100. Look at the Kelvin scale. The temperature on Kelvin scale is, let us say, K. K minus 273 by what is the total length of the Kelvin scale? 100. So this is what is the relation we have between the value of temperature on Fahrenheit scale, value of temperature on the Celsius scale, and value of temperature on the Kelvin scale. So here the Kelvin formula, right? Either we will use 273 or we can use 273.15. That is more precise actually. So this is what we will be using for doing the temperature conversion from one scale to other scale. So what is the idea behind it? The relative distance traveled on any scale must be same. Now using this, how we will go about doing the conversion? Let us say we want to convert temperature between Celsius and Kelvin. What we will do? We will equate first and second term. If we equate means 100 gets cancelled. Celsius is equal to what? K minus 273.15. Otherwise Celsius plus 273.15 is equal to Kelvin, like that. If you want to convert the temperature between Celsius scale and Fahrenheit scale, what we have to do there? We have to equate first term and the third term. So look at this, what we will get? Celsius by 100 is equal to what? Fahrenheit minus 32 by 180. So this is what? 29s are 25s. So what is it? Celsius value is equal to 5 by 9 into degree Fahrenheit minus 32. So these are the kind of formulas which we will see in our lower standards, right? And how they will come? They will come from the concept that the relative distance traveled on any temperature scale must be same. Now we'll look at one sample question. At what temperature the centigrade means the Celsius scale part, and Fahrenheit readings are going to be the same? Means if you say X is the temperature reading on the Celsius scale, the value of the temperature reading on the Fahrenheit scale also will be same. So we have to tell what is the temperature. How do we do it? What is the relation we have? Degree Celsius minus 0 by 100 is equal to Fahrenheit minus 32 by 180, right? So both the temperature scales, it must be same. Means we will put it as X. X by 100 is equal to what? X minus 32 by 180. Okay, so if you cancel it, it will be what? 9x is equal to what? 5x minus 5 into 132. So 4x is equal to what? What is 5 into 32? This is minus 160. So 4x is equal to minus 160 means x will be equal to what? Minus 40. So the temperature value on Celsius scale, whose numerical value will be same on the Fahrenheit scale also. What is that reading? It is what? Minus 40. So what is the correct answer for this? Option A. Like, usually what it is, we will not get like straight questions, convert the temperature from Celsius scale to Fahrenheit scale, like that we will not get. We will have some kind of modified scenarios like this one. And from the JEE mains or JEE advanced point of view, right, generally we can expect questions on this model, which we call as the unknown temperature scale model. Like, they will say there is a faulty thermometer, and the faulty thermometer is showing the freezing point of water temperature as some 5 degrees Celsius. Similarly, they will say the boiling point is recorded as maybe 95. Then they will ask if the reading on this scale is showing as some 42, what is the true value of temperature? Like that they can ask. Basically the idea is they will propose to us one more new or unknown temperature scale, and they will ask us to date this unknown temperature scale to the ones that we are already aware of. The idea is very simple. Like, look at this. Previously what we had, the normal Celsius scale is freezing point of water is 0 and the boiling point is 100. The new temperature scale that we are talking about here, that is coming from the faulty thermometer. What is this? We will call it as degree Celsius dash. Freezing point is 5. What is the boiling point? 95. So the length of the scale here you can see is what? 90. Normal Celsius scale is 100. So what is the relation? Same. The relative distance means on Celsius scale, the true one, if the reading is some degree Celsius, minus 0 by 100, that will be equal to what? The reading on the faulty scale. That's why I'm putting dash. Starting point here is what? 5. Divided by what is the length of the scale here? 90. So this is the relation. Always the same concept. Like the way we related the Celsius scale, Kelvin scale, Fahrenheit scale, same way we have to relate the unknown temperature scale that is generally given by the faulty thermometer to the ones that we are already aware of. Same concept. Relative distance traveled on any temperature scale will be same. That is the idea. So here once we have this relation, right, if they are giving us a faulty reading, which means they are giving us this degree Celsius dash, we can find what is the true value. If they give us the true value, we can find what will be the reading on the faulty scale, anything. Okay, so this is a very important model of question in terms of the temperature conversion. So we talked about the different temperature scales that we will commonly be using, and what is the idea of conversion from one temperature scale to other. But how do we measure the temperature? The instrument that we use for measuring temperature is basically what we call as a thermometer. And we will have different types of thermometers. Thermometers, right, will be working on the basis of what we call as a thermometric property. So any thermometer, we will see some examples also. They will work on the thermometric properties. What is thermometric property? It is a property that will change. The value of the property will change based on the temperature. Means we will typically get one equation relating how the property value is changing to temperature change. Based on that, we will be able to form the temperature scale. We will look at example. Like, if you look at the first example, right, we're talking about the mercury column thermometer, where we'll have the mercury in the liquid state that will be kept inside this mercury bulb. If you look at the 0 degree Celsius, let's say the length of the mercury level in the capillary is L0. As the temperature is increased up to T, the length of the mercury column in the capillary 2 becomes what? L subscript T. In thermal expansion, we will see this relation. the linear expansion of an material, length at temperature T is equal to L naught into 1 plus alpha T. In this, alpha will be called as the quotient of linear expansion. So this relation we will study about it in detail when we go to thermal expansion. But here the idea is, yes, we can relate the length at 0 and length at T, because the length we will be able to measure by using a scale like this. So as you can see, the length is correlated to temperature. Like, if the length is coming up to here, means that is going to represent what, 38 degrees. If the length is coming up to here, means 39. Coming up to here means 40, like that. Like that, we will be marking on the scale. So the thermal expansion of mercury is the property here that we are using. Since the thermal expansion is there, linear expansion, the length of the mercury column in the capillary tube, it will be very thin tube. Okay, what is capillary tube? We already talked about it in the properties of fluids, capillary raise and capillary dip concept. Okay, so this is what the first thermometer, which works on the, what is the property here we are using? The length of the mercury column, which changes based on the temperature. Now here one more thing, of course, this is more like a theoretical question. What is the working range of the mercury thermometer? Mercury thermometer will work in the range of minus 50 degrees Celsius to 350 degrees Celsius. Because obviously we are looking at mercury. I mean, one of the reasons why mercury is chosen substance is because it is in the liquid state, and also it has got a high value for alpha. The quotient of linear expansion is high for mercury. So even for small temperature change, right, we can see some significant change in the length of the column. Noticeable change we can observe. So if you look at liquid state, that only exists from where? The freezing point to boiling point, right? So freezing point of mercury is minus 50. Means we cannot use the mercury thermometer below minus 50. Same time boiling point is 350. So we cannot use the mercury thermometer above 350. So that is what we call as the working range of the mercury thermometer. So this might be sometimes, some theoretical straightforward question if it is coming, means they can even ask like that. Next we will go to the electrical resistance of metals. It's a property that can be used to form the temperature scale. So this is something that we will again see in the +2 current electricity chapter. If we have resistance of the material at 0 degrees Celsius R naught, at temperature T, the resistance is what? RT. Then just like the way we have the length relation in terms of temperature, right, here we can also have what? A resistance relation in terms of temperature. A resistance at temperature T will be equal to R naught into 1 plus alpha T. This alpha is what we will call as the temperature quotient of resistance. Particularly for 100 degrees Celsius, right, if you are trying to represent the resistance, means we will call it as what? R100. Now how do we measure the temperature by using the resistance values? So we have a final formula here. We will see how the formula comes. What is the formula here that we are having? RT is equal to, if you multiply inside, right, R naught plus R naught alpha T. So from here RT minus R naught is equal to what? R naught alpha T. Let us call it as equation 1. If you take the relation between 0 and 100 degrees, then R100 minus R naught is equal to what? R naught into alpha into 100 will come. That is equation 2. So equation 2 is we are taking the final temperature reading to be at 100. Now if you just divide both equation 1 by equation 2, if you do, what you will get? Left hand side RT minus R naught by R100 minus R naught will come. That is the left hand side is equal to what? Right hand side you can see R naught alpha will get cancelled. So T by 100. So just bring the 100 to the left side. It will go to the numerator. So what is the T value? RT minus R naught by R100 minus R naught into 100. So like this, if you are having the resistance value at 0 degrees Celsius, resistance at 100, based upon whatever is the resistance at the temperature T, right, we can find what is the value of temperature T. So this is how the thermometers, based on the resistance measurement of the metals, they will be working on. The third property that can be used, particularly the devices that use this, we call them as pyrometers. So what are these pyrometers? Pyrometers are the devices that use to measure the temperature by measuring the intensity of the radiation received from body. Like now we are in the corona days, right? You see, when you are entering into a shopping mall, or when you're getting into airport or railway station, they use this device. They just point out the device at you, and what you will observe that on the device they will see the reading of the temperature. So we can see that how it is kind of working. It will measure what is the radiation received from your body, and based on the intensity of the radiation received, it will be able to measure the temperature. So the temperature reading is going to be based upon what? The intensity of the radiation received. How the temperature of a body will be related to the radiation the body will give, we will see in the heat transfer. There we'll talk about something called as a Stephen's law. So based on the temperature, a body at high temperature will give more radiation. A body at low temperature will give us less radiation. So the pyrometer, right, will work on the idea of how much intensity the pyrometer is receiving from the object to which it is exposed to. So if it is exposed to an object which is at high temperature, means it will receive more intensity of radiation. Then accordingly the temperature reading will be shown like that. Okay, so this is about the three thermometric properties. One we have seen in terms of the normal mercury thermometer, where the length of the mercury in the capillary tube based on the thermal expansion of mercury. Second thing is based on the variation of resistance of metal. Third is what? Based on the intensity of the radiation received by the pyrometer. Now we said the calorimetry is a precursor to thermodynamics. When you are giving heat to an object, let's say we have an object here. So we have an object here. When we are supplying a heat, let's say we are giving a heat delta Q, either we can use small q or capital Q, whichever it is. This is what? Heat supplied to the object. Here we will follow a sign convention. If it is heat given to the object, means it will be plus, because there is a heat gain for the object. If it is taken from the object, that much amount of heat is taken from the object, means we will in terms of sign convention we will take it negative. Any heat gain for the object is positive, any heat loss is what? Negative. If you are giving the heat delta Q to the object, right, then the temperature of the object will change. For every object we will define the heat capacity, which will indicate with the capital C. Okay, so capital C is used to represent what? Heat capacity, that is given by heat that is supplied to the object by the temperature change. You can see in terms of unit rate, it will be what? Joule per Kelvin. We can even talk about the dimensional formula. What is the dimensional formula of heat energy? ml square T power minus 2. Temperature means we will represent this with the symbol theta. So what is it? ml square T power minus 2 theta power minus 1. That is the dimensional formula for the heat capacity. Now the thing is, heat capacity will of course depend upon the nature of the material. Not just that, it also depends upon the amount of the substance, which means, to give an example, right, let's say we have some small quantity of water, and another vessel we have a large quantity of water. So here what is it? This is a large quantity of water. We want to raise the temperature of both of them by 1 Kelvin. Temperature of small quantity of water we want to raise by 1 Kelvin. Temperature of large quantity of water also we want to raise by 1 Kelvin. Now look at this. Obviously this is something that we will practically observe. You have a water in a small vessel, you try to heat it, it will get heated fast. You take a large vessel, put on the same stove, it will be taking a lot of time for the heating up, isn't it? So which means here if you say the heat supplied is delta Q, it will be a small value. Here if you see the delta Q, it will be what? Large value. When you try to measure the heat capacity here, C1 let us call it as, the heat that is supplied here, which will be small value of course, divided by temperature change is what, 1 Kelvin. Here what is the heat capacity C2, heat that we supply here, obviously it will be large value, divided by temperature change again 1 Kelvin. So what we see is for the large quantity of water we taken, the heat capacity is higher. For the small quantity of water, heat capacity is what, lower, which means the heat capacity will depend upon not only the nature of material but also on the quantity or the amount. So here we are going to be talking about a new physical quantity which will be only depending upon the nature of material, and that is what we will be calling as the specific heat capacity. So what is specific heat capacity? It will be a property which will be only depending upon the nature of material. It will not depend upon the quantity. So specific heat capacity of a substance, which we will represent with the symbol small s, that is defined as heat given to the object divided by mass of the object into temperature change. So how do we give the definition? Heat required to change unit mass of an object by 1 degree Celsius or 1 Kelvin, because temperature change on Celsius scale and Kelvin scale will be same, unit length is same on both the scales, right? So this is how we can define the specific heat. Like, we'll have specific heat capacity of iron, specific heat capacity of copper, like that. It will be a property of the material. So again, you can see here what will be the specific heat capacity, SI unit, joule per kg. So what is it? Joule per kg per Kelvin. Another common unit will be calorie per gram per degree Celsius. In fact, for water, right, the value of S will be 1 calorie per gram per degree Celsius. This is the specific heat capacity of water. Now for the solids and liquids, specific heat capacity is just going to be a property of the material. But for the gases, what we see is the specific heat capacity value will be changing based on what kind of process the gas is undergoing. About this we will be again learning in detail when we go to the thermodynamics as well as the kinetic theory of gases. But for the gases alone, what is it that we need to keep in mind? The specific heat capacity will depend on the manner in which temperature is changed. Means whether we are changing the temperature by keeping volume of the gas constant, or whether we are changing the temperature by keeping the pressure constant, like that. And moreover, for the gases, right, we will define molar specific heat capacities in terms of moles. So what is it? If you are looking at the definition for the molar specific heat capacity at constant volume, as I said, they will depend upon the manner in which the temperature change is obtained. CV is what? Molar specific heat capacity at constant volume. So the way we will define it is the heat change for the gas when we maintain the volume constant, divide by number of moles in temperature change. We will divide by using number of moles. Similarly, if you look at the unit of this, it will be what? Joule per mole will come. For gases, we can also define one more molar specific heat capacity, which we call as CP, that is at constant pressure. This is what, if you look at what is the heat change for the gas at constant pressure divided by number of moles in temperature change. So we'll study detail about what will be the relation between CP and CV, all these things in both the kinetic theory of gases topic as well as in the thermodynamics part. Now here generally in our calorimetry we will be focusing on the solids and liquids mostly. If you are looking at different substances, right, obviously the specific heat capacity values will be changing. Like I said before, specific heat capacity of iron will be something, specific heat capacity of copper will be something like that. Now when you are trying to study the heat changes of different objects, we will have to obviously know, because from the formula, right, what is the specific heat capacity of the object? It will be the heat change for the object by mass of the object into temperature change. So we cross multiply means what we will get? Ms delta T will be equal to what? Heat change for the object. Heat change for the object is what? Ms delta T. Also we can write in the other notation using heat capacity, capital C formula. What is capital C? Delta Q by delta T. Cross multiply, what we will get? C into delta T is equal to delta Q. So if you want to know the heat change for the object, either we can express this in terms of the specific heat capacity, or we can express this in terms of what? The overall heat capacity of the object. By the way, we can also have one more relation here. You can see heat change is same in both the equations, and it means what? Ms delta T should be equal to what? C into delta T. Means what is the heat capacity of any object? Mass of the object into the specific heat capacity of the material by which the object is made up of. Now the idea that different objects will be made up of different materials, so the specific heat capacity will keep changing. So we have to calculate heat changes for, like, say 20 objects. Don't you think it is going to be complicated? Yes. If you have 100 objects, it is going to be even more complicated. So there is a different idea which can simplify these issues. That is the idea of the water equivalent. What is the water equivalent? It's very simple. Water equivalent of certain amount of any substance, like 20 grams of copper is there, 30 grams of iron is there. When we say water equivalent of that, means the amount of water which, when replaced by the substance, means whatever the substance, like 20 grams of copper is there, we want to replace it by some amount of water, and this amount of water will perform the same heat changes as that of the original substance. Means what? Let us say I have some mass M of a substance whose specific capacity is S. If it's undergoing temperature delta T, what is the heat change for this substance? Ms delta T. If I say the water equivalent of the substance is Mw, the corresponding water equivalent, means we want to replace the substance by this much amount of water. It may be 5 grams, it may be 6 grams. So for water, right, what will be the heat change formula? Mass of water into specific capacity of water. Already we have seen this, right? It is a known value, 1 calorie per gram per degree Celsius into the same temperature change. Means we have to just replace the material and keep water there. For the same rise in temperature, the amount of water we are replacing, right, will be undergoing the same heat changes. That's it. So look at this. What is the relation we have? Delta T cancels. So this is the formula for finding out what is the water equivalent. This Mw is what we call as water equivalent. Means if I say that there is some 20 grams of a vessel which is made up of tin, but this can be replaced by water equivalent of 4 grams. Means for heat changes, right, we can simply forget about the 20 grams of tin vessel and think of that in place of it, what is there? Just 4 grams of water is there with us, like that. So this is the idea of the water equivalent. Now we'll see how the water equivalent concept is used. In calorimetry, one of the important principles that we have is the thermal equilibrium. What is thermal equilibrium? As we said, if you have a hot object and there is a cold object, heat is going to flow from hot object to cold object. Till when? Till both of them reach the state of thermal equilibrium. So thermal equilibrium, the way we understand now is both of them will reach the common temperature, which we call as what? Equilibrium temperature. Hot object, temperature will decrease. Cold object, temperature increases. So that finally they both will reach the same equilibrium temperature. And once equilibrium is reached, what is it that we can see? No net heat transfer between the objects because they are in thermal equilibrium. This is the concept of thermal equilibrium. Okay. Now based on thermal equilibrium, right, because the laws of thermodynamics we will see in the thermodynamics part, but there is one fundamental law of thermodynamics, or very basic law, that is what we call as the zeroth law of thermodynamics. Since it is related to thermal equilibrium, right? We will talk about it here. Again, when we go to thermodynamics also, we will make a mention of it. So what is the zeroth law of thermodynamics? It is based on the idea of thermal equilibrium. So if we have two systems A and B, what is the system in the language of thermodynamics, right? Whatever we are observing or studying, that is what we call a system. There is system A and there is system B. They are separated by adiabatic wall. Adiabatic wall means, about this also we will mention in the thermodynamics. This adiabatic wall is something that will not allow heat transfer. That is what we call as the adiabatic wall. There will be one more type of wall which will allow the heat transfer, but again we'll talk about it in the thermodynamics chapter. That's why we are not getting into the details of it. That type of wall will be called as the diathermic wall. Okay. Idea is, okay, system A and system B, they don't transfer any heat, but they are separately and independently in thermal equilibrium with the third system C. Means A is in equilibrium with C, like that B is also separately in equilibrium with C. Then what is the zeroth law going to tell us? It says that A and B also will be in thermal equilibrium with each other. Standing from today's understanding point of view, right, it might look like a kind of common sense. Why? Because previously what we said, when two objects are in thermal equilibrium means, what is it? Both the objects will have the same temperature, isn't it? So if I say that system A is in equilibrium with C, means what? Temperature of A is equal to temperature of C. If I say that system B is in equilibrium with C, means temperature of B is equal to temperature of C. Now from these equations what we can conclude? Temperature of A must be equal to temperature of B, right? So kind of it looks like a common sense for us now, but at the time people still have to conclude it by making system A and system B to come together and observe that there is no net heat transfer happening between them. And since it is a fundamental law related to thermal equilibrium, that's why we are discussing about it in the calorimetry part. Again, we will also talk about it when we go to thermodynamics, because in thermodynamics we will talk about the first law, second law. Along with that, we will also mention the zeroth law. Okay. Now, the main segment of this is, okay, we have been talking about if you supply heat to the object, temperature of the object will rise. But what is the practical application of it? The practical application of it is what we will see through the principle of calorimetry. What is the principle of calorimetry? So here, instead of calling it as calorimetry, we can call it as what? The principle of calorimetry. It's very simple. So if you have object 1, object 2, object 3, like that we can have many objects. We make them to come together and they reach thermal equilibrium, means they will keep transferring heat between them till there is thermal equilibrium. Means what? All of them are finally going to have the same common temperature. Initially they may have different temperatures, but finally they will be having the same common temperature. Now if you look at heat change for the object 1 is delta Q1, heat change for the object 2 delta Q2, heat change for the object 3 delta Q3. Like that we can have many objects also. The principle of calorimetry says what? The sum of heat changes, what is it? The sum of heat changes for all the objects which are attaining thermal equilibrium together will add up to 0. Why I will tell you? Because see, object 1 is heat object, hot object means what? It will lose heat. So maybe delta Q1 is some minus 40. Object 2 and 3, let's say they are cold objects, they are going to gain. So for them, if you look at the delta Q means it will be positive. If object 3 is gaining 10, object 2 will gain 30. So that if you add them up, right, 10 plus 30 is what? Totally it will be adding up to plus 40. It's very simple. Whatever the heat lost by the cold objects, heat lost by the hot objects will be equal to the heat gained by the cold objects. That is what? The heat lost by the hot objects is equal to heat gained by the cold objects. So heat lost means what? That will be, as per our convention, it will be coming as negative. Heat gain means what? It will be coming positive. Look at this. What is the formula for the heat? Ms delta T, right? Temperature increasing means delta T will be positive. So hence heat change also will be positive. Temperature decreasing means what? Delta T will be negative. Delta T means what? Final temperature minus initial temperature. So in that case, heat change also will be what? Negative. So the principle of calorimetry is based on the idea that if you have a group of objects reaching thermal equilibrium simultaneously, then the sum of the heat changes for the objects will be adding up to 0. That's it. Now this is what will be used in a device which we call as the calorimeter. See, calorimeter in chemistry, right? Chemistry thermodynamics chapter, you will study about it in detail. Even you will talk about what are the two different types of calorimeter design. But here from the, so what you are seeing here is a digital calorimeter, where we can see the reading will be automatically displayed on the digital meter over there. So what is the typical setup of a calorimeter? You will have a calorimeter vessel with water. If you have an unknown substance which we are bringing, typically this will be at a high temperature. We can use the calorimetry principle and find what is the specific heat capacity of the unknown substance. In physics, right? What is the main use of the calorimetry discussion? It is going to help us to find what is the specific heat capacity of the unknown substance. How we will see it? Let us say we have the vessel mass V, mv. Specific heat capacity of the material is SV. Water mass mw, specific heat capacity SW. These things will be known to us. In fact, the mass of the unknown material also will be known to us because we can measure the mass. Initially, both of the vessel and water will be at the room temperature or ambient temperature, TA. Hot body will be at a high temperature. Finally, all of them will reach equilibrium temperature. For the unknown substance, right, what is the heat change? Mass of it into specific heat capacity into delta T means what? Final equilibrium temperature minus initial temperature is the temperature of the hot body. In this I am marking, you see, this is the only unknown. Other things are all thermometers, we can keep it to measure the temperature. This is the heat change for the unknown material. What is the heat change for the vessel? Mass of the vessel into specific heat. Finally, it is reaching equilibrium temperature. Initially, what is it? Ambient temperature. What is the heat change for the water? Mass of water into specific heat capacity of water into the temperature change is what? Final temperature is equilibrium temperature minus initial is what? Ambient temperature. When you add up all the heat changes, right, that should be adding up to 0, right? That is the principle of calorimetry. Look at this. In this equation, other than the specific heat of the unknown material, rest all is known to us. Or if you are solving a problem, means everything will be given to us. Using this, we will be able to solve for the value of S. We can find what is the value of S using this equation. So this is what we need to look at in terms of the applications of the calorimeter from the physics point of view. In chemistry means there you will study calorimeter mostly to calculate what is the heat change during a chemical reaction. That is the reason why you will design two types of setup. One, you maintain the volume to be fixed, where if you maintain the volume to be fixed for the reaction in which the for the vessel in which the reaction is happening, then you will measure the internal energy change delta U for the chemical reaction. Instead, if you maintain the pressure constant, then you will measure the delta H, enthalpy change of the chemical reaction. So those things you will see in the chemistry thermodynamics. But here for us, right, the calorimeter use is what? To find the specific heat capacity of the unknown substance that we will get by using this equation. Okay. Now we will see one sample question. This is based on the principle of calorimetry. Copper rod of mass m, specific heat capacity S, initially temperature 70, is brought in touch with iron rod mass 2m, specific heat capacity is what? 1.5 S, which has initial temperature 40. What is the final equilibrium temperature? We are bringing them together means, look at this. We have the copper mass m, temperature is what? 70. We are bringing this in contact with iron. What is the mass of the iron? 2m. What is the temperature? 40. So both of them will achieve thermal equilibrium. let us say the equilibrium temperature is T. For copper, what is the heat change? Mass into specific heat into temperature change means what? Final temperature is T minus initially 70 plus what is the iron? Mass is 2m, specific heat capacity is what? 1.5 into S. Delta T means what? Temperature change. So here we can see one thing, ms we can take common. This is what? T minus 70. Here what do we have? 2 into 1.5 is 3. So we'll have 3T minus 120. So m into s we can take to the other side, that will be anyway becoming 0. So what do we have? 4T minus 190 is equal to 0. So T will be equal to what? 190 by 4. What is 190 by 4? That is 190 by 4 means first we can cancel, like 95 2s are what? 190. So 95 by 2 means it will be what? 47.5. So what is the final equilibrium temperature of the iron and copper? It is what? 47.5. So all we are doing is the principle of calorimetry. Sum of the heat changes is adding up to what? 0. That's it. After that you will just have to do some numerical simplification steps. Okay. So this is about the kind of problems which you can expect based on the principle of calorimetry. Now sometimes even in the calorimeter problem, right, we said vessel and vessel mass. Instead of giving this, what they say is the vessel material has water equivalent. The vessel material has water equivalent of 10 grams. Means this entire calculation, right, we can replace by using what? 10 grams of water. Means in place of this mass of vessel into specific heat capacity of vessel, what you will get? 10 grams of water into specific heat capacity of water. Like that, sometimes they can give us the water equivalent of the vessel material. What we have to do, just replace the vessel calculation with what? Whatever the water equivalent they give us, we will take that much amount of water, like that. Okay, so this is how we can bring the water equivalent concept into calorimeter problems. Generally we will see like this only. Okay, so this is about the calorimeter concept or the principle of calorimetry concept. Now we have been saying that when we give heat to the object, temperature of the object will rise. That is the basis for the calculation of heat capacity or the specific heat capacity. That is what we said, right? Whatever the heat given to the object by mass of the object and temperature change. But does it mean that always when we give heat, temperature is going to change? No. How do we know that? By using the heat diagram. So if you say, for example, start from some temperature, keep on giving heat. This is the time for which we are supplying the heat. We keep on giving the heat. So what we see is that relation is a linear relation up to the substance reaching the melting point. So here you can observe one thing. What is happening? Once it is reaching the melting point, what we see is that we are supplying heat here, you can see, but temperature is not changing. The heat that is taken for the melting of the substance, because this heat is not going to result in temperature change. This heat is only going to result in what? Converting the substance from solid state to liquid state. The particles in liquid state will have a higher internal energy than particles in solid state. So the heat that is needed to change the substance from the solid state to liquid state, that is what we call as the latent heat of fusion. Generally we will represent with a symbol LF. So what is the latent heat of fusion? This is the part, this part, right? The heat that is supplied during the phase change from the solid state to liquid state. For water, if you take, means it will be what? 80 calories per gram approximately. After that, again what we see, once the substance is converted into fully liquid, we will see the relation is again straight line. As you supply heat means the temperature is again increasing up to, if you go with this as water, right, 0 degrees Celsius is where we will observe the latent heat of fusion. Then once we come to 100 degrees Celsius, again what we observe here, you can see what is happening. We are supplying heat between the time T3 and T2. That much time we are supplying the heat. but temperature is not changing. This is what we'll refer to as the latent heat of vaporization, L subscript V. For water, the value is 540 calories per gram. Again, once the substance is changed into the vapor state, means we can see that what is happening here, the temperature again will be increasing, linear relation. Because for any material, right, what is the relation in terms of temperature? You can see del Q, heat supplied, is equal to what? Ms delta T. So with temperature, we'll have a linear relation. Okay. So this is about the heat diagram, and where we'll observe the scenario of object absorbing heat or taking heat, but temperature of the object will not be changing. Now the thing that we need to keep in mind is, when we convert the object from solid state to liquid state, the latent heat of fusion has to be supplied. When you're moving from solid state to liquid state. Similarly, we have to supply latent heat of evaporation when we are moving from liquid state to the vapor state. But if the material is coming from vapor state to liquid state, means same amount of energy will be released. If a material is coming from liquid state to solid state, means same amount of energy will be released out. So this is the concept of the latent heat. Just look at this question. What is the work done in converting 1 gram of ice, which is at minus 10 degrees Celsius, into steam, which is at 100 degrees Celsius? So here this question we have to, of course, have data also. The data that is required to solve this question is specific heat capacity of ice is 0.5 calorie per gram per degree Celsius. And specific heat capacity of water we know is what? 1 calorie per gram per degree Celsius. Latent heat of fusion for the ice is what? 80 calories per gram. Latent heat of evaporation is what? 540 calories per gram. This data must be given to us. Then only we can solve. So look at this, what is happening. Initially we have ice which is at minus 10. So ice minus 10, we have to convert this to ice at 0. That is step 1. Step 2 is what? Ice at 0, we have to do phase change. We'll get what? Water at 0. That is step 2. There we have to supply the latent heat of fusion. Then water at 0 to water at 100. That is the step 3. Then water at 100 to steam at 100. That is the step 4. How many steps are there? 4 steps. What are the 4 steps? First, ice we have at minus 10. From minus 10 we have to bring it up to 0. Step 1. Step 2 is what? Latent heat, converting ice into water. Step 3 is what? Water from 0 to taking it up to 100. Step 4 is what? Converting water at 100 to steam at 100. That's it. Now we'll just have to do one by one. So for the first step, what is the heat change required? Mass is what? The 1 gram. So 1 gram into specific capacity of ice is what? 0.5 into what is the delta T? We are bringing from minus 10 to 0. Means 0 minus of minus 10. So what is this totally? Everything is in terms of mass is in gram, and the specific capacity is in terms of calorie per gram. So and now the temperature is in terms of Celsius. So what we will get finally, what is it that we will have? It will be 5 calories. That is the delta Q1. Simple Ms delta T formula. Now the second heat change, that is ice at 0 to water at 0. That is the phase change. We have 1 gram means what? How much we will require? 80 calories is required. That is the value, right? For a mass M means we will do what? M into latent heat, because here mass is what? 1 gram only, right? The step 3 is where we are converting water at 0 to water at 100. Again what we will get? Mass 1 gram into specific capacity is what? 1 into what is the temperature change, means 0 to 100 means 100. This is what? 100 calories will come. What about the delta Q4? Fourth phase change from water to steam. So delta Q4 is going to be what? 540 calories. Because for 1 gram, how much latent heat of evaporation is required? 540. So that's it. So what is the overall heat that is required for doing this conversion of ice at minus 10 to steam at 100? So what is the conversion we will get? What is the overall heat required means what we will have to do? We have to add all of them, right? 5 plus 80, 85, 185 plus, so what is it? 185 plus 540. That is what? 5 to 725 calories. So 725 calories means you look at the answers, right? Answers are in terms of what? Joules. How do you convert? Conversion factor, right? The mechanical equivalent of heat, 4.2. So how do you convert the calories into joule means simply we have to multiply by 4.2. So 725 into 4.2 if you do means we will see that it will be approximately what? 3000. How much it will become? It will come as what? 3045. So what we are doing essentially here is the conversion of the final heat that is required to be supplied. So we'll have to do the work in some form to supply this amount of heat. So what is the answer for this? It will be 3045 joules. Now this is about the calorimetry part, and then next video, right, we will discuss about the thermal expansion. So that is the second segment of the thermal properties of matter.